And the only thing that would get her back to Bethlehem would be death. I'm convinced that God sometimes brings hardships into our sphere to move us to the place where He wants to use us. And sometimes it comes through death, it comes through a firing, it comes through abandonment, it comes through a rift in a relationship. There are many traumatic things that may happen that God will use that He might be glorified, and He calls this shift and thrust, and this, I'm convinced, is what thrusts them back to Bethlehem.
This is the Infusion broadcast with the Roche Coleman Ministries, and we're so glad you've tuned in to join us. Our current series is based on the book of Ruth, brought to you by Dr. Roche Coleman. Now, having provided an overview of the book last week, he gets straight to the desperate situation Naomi finds herself in, showing us how God has a way of entering into the darkest and most hopeless situations of mankind. Before we get to the lesson, I want to let you know that Dr. Coleman's main goal and passion is to share the gospel on these broadcasts and to teach and challenge believers to confidently put their trust in God and grow in spiritual maturity. We hope these goals resonate with you. If so, would you come alongside to support us financially? We're a listener-supported broadcast, and your generous one-time or ongoing contribution of any size will help us both with airtime and operational costs. You can contribute online at RocheColemanMinistries.org or mail a check to Roche Coleman Ministries, 594 Sawdust Road, Suite 185, The Woodlands, Texas, 77380. We appreciate your support very much. We're excited about bringing this series on the book of Ruth, and as you'll see, it's an incredibly relatable story, and Dr. Coleman powerfully draws a variety of lessons in today's message, a covenant commitment.
We began looking at the book of Ruth last week, and we were looking at some of the historical context that was going on. And one of the things that I want to make certain we go back over and look at was just in review, just remembering the context of what was happening. This is at the conclusion of the book of Judges. And remember that in the book of Judges, as it concludes in Judges, I think it's 21:25, he says, there was no king in the land, and everyone did what was right in their own eyes. And so that lets us know that there was a level of lawlessness. There was no central government. You see here, we had, they were making like tribal confederations, these little independent groups. And then they were enduring the foreign oppression from those various other groups who would come in, the Midianites, and so forth. You know how those groups would come in and oppress Israel. And then what happened is they had the judges who had been elevated to a status of leadership and rule. And the role of the judges were to serve in these regional capacities as they would mediate between various warring groups. They would give instructions of how people should conduct themselves. But the judges still was a dark period, and it went in a cyclical pattern where people would obey, then they would disobey. They'd go into idolatry, apostasy, and then God would come in and deliver them. And so that was the context of what we saw. And as a result of that, there was a famine in the land in Bethlehem in verse 1. We noted that. That famine came on in Bethlehem, and we said, Bethlehem, everyone should learn from the study of Ruth. You got to know the name of Bethlehem and what it means. It means what? There it is. The house of bread. And so there was no bread in the house of bread. And so as a result of disobedience, apostasy, there's a dearth, a lack of food. And so what we have here, we're introduced to this guy, Elimelech. Elimelech, my God is king, God is king. And so what happens is Elimelech decides that, hey, there's no bread in the house of bread. So what is he going to do? He's going to leave from Bethlehem, and he goes down to Moab. And we saw that, and we noted that the trek from Bethlehem to Moab We looked at this also last week. This is where Bethlehem is. And for them to get there, they're going to have to go around the Dead Sea, cross the Jordan River here. But they had to make this trek either this way or that way to get to the land of Moab. So we're looking at least easily 70 to 100 mile journey, walk. You're looking at 7 to easily 10-day journey for them to get there. You got to understand the terrain. You got to consider the season. They got to deal with bandits, bears, wild beasts, all of these things. And so that was a challenge. But nevertheless, that was a situation going on. And so what happens is they leave Bethlehem and they get down to Moab. And once they get down to Moab, this is where things began to get a little dicey. And so that's what we want to pick up in chapter 1. They leave after the famine, and notice who's with him. His entire family is Elimelech, his wife Naomi, and their 2 sons, Mahlon and Chilion. We're going to see this. Now, they get there, and it's important how we get the names of these boys, and it's kind of an indication already. I think we're getting a wink and a nod at what's going to happen, because their names kind of identify who they are. Mahlon is sick, and Chilion is pining. They seem like they're not robust, strong. They're kind of sickly, slight infirmary that they're dealing with, but it's encapsulated in their names, their identity. It's intriguing here, and I want you to catch this. Elimelech's name means God is my king, and I'm saying, if God is your king, should you be going to Moab? Is he wrong necessarily to go to Moab? Should he have done this? Do you think he should have stayed in Bethlehem and waited? Or was he wrong to go and say, hey, I want to go and try to find food? What say ye? So let's go see. Won't hurt to go check it out, huh? I'm a punt. Hey, you got to make a call. You have to make a call. I don't think there's a right or wrong answer, but you have to know where you're going. You are entering enemy territory, right? You got to understand that. We're going to look at this now because we've talked about some of this already last week. He is definitely going into enemy territory. Why? What do we see that was so important about the whole issue of the Moabites? Remember, the Moabites were foreigners. They were descendants of who? Lot, and his incestuous relationship with his daughters. And so this is who these Moabites are. Let's see what happened once they get there, because this is where all of the things began to get dicey. They entered the land and they remained there. The text doesn't tell us. This is sometimes I'm like, man, couldn't you just throw us a footnote over here or something and tell us how long they were there before the death occurred? Doesn't give us that information. But Elimelech, husband, he dies. Death. Whenever you have death, this is separation. A separation. And so this death has tremendous implications for Naomi and those boys. Because now, remember where we are. We're in the period of the judges. This is in antiquity. This is a period of time where there are no courts or systems to protect and provide for people. And so she has to now kind of intervene and provide leadership for the family. And this is going to be important as we watch this. Watch. Elimelech's dead. Do you think he died because, is this a punishment, or maybe he just died? So what about God being transcendent, above, greater than everything? What about God being imminently involved in our situations? And what about the omnipresence of God? Okay, these are some attributes of God. So if God is transcendent, omnipresent, imminently involved, if I am in Moab, if I am in Edom, no matter where I am, is God not there? So just throwing it out there for consideration. And the reason why I want you to see this and consider this is because Can God provide for me in a foreign land? Can. So when we make those calls, I want you to consider and look through the lens of the attributes of God as you are doing this. You got me? Here it is. So he's dead. She's left with her 2 sons. And man, real quick, they took for themselves Moabite women as wives. Is this a problem? What is this a problem? Why is this a problem? Tell me why. I mean, they needed wives, so why not? Remember in the book of Numbers when this is one place where we see a true command, a charge to them regarding the Moabites. Remember when we talked about King Balak tried to get Balaam to curse Israel? This is in Numbers chapter 22. And so what happens in Numbers 22, because the Moabites did not come out and bring them bread and water, and even Nehemiah referenced this in Nehemiah chapter 13. He says, hey, your brothers did not come out and bring you bread and water when you were fleeing from your bondage in Egypt. And so the Moabites represent a stumbling block. They are like the Hasatan role in the Old Testament. They are the adversary to the people of Israel. They are a tangible, visible manifestation of being an adversary, okay? Like Satan is in the New Testament for us. They are a visible manifestation of being a stumbling block, a problem, a challenge. Whereas in the New Testament, it is invisible, and we see the invisible work of Satan in the life of the believer. And so here, that's what Moabites and the Moabite people represent. Furthermore, after they couldn't curse, that is, the Moabites couldn't curse Israel, watch what happens in Numbers 25. What happens is the women get the men to play the role of adultery by going after the gods of the Moabites. If you look in Numbers chapter 25, here it is, the text is here before you. While Israel remained at Shittim, the people began to play the harlot with the daughters of Moab. He says, we couldn't curse you, so we're going to find another way to get you to not be devoted and faithful to God. All of these are reasons why Naomi should have not recommended those boys marrying Moabite women, because they had been known for their allegiance to the gods of Shemosh, and some believe even maybe Molech, because the women have a great level of influence on men when it comes to their worship. And so she should never have recommended them marrying Moabite women. But because of the situation, I believe Elimelech's gone, the covering that Elimelech brings, the direction, it left room for this to occur. And God can use bad decision and poor choices to still bring forth his glory. And he's going to do this through Ruth. But they shouldn't have married these Moabite women. Yeah, whenever we're supposed to remain focused, and they deviate, but God still, he grants grace. Solomon did the same thing. Remember when Solomon was king, and the Bible's clear, First Kings 11, it talks about how he married the daughters of Pharaoh, Moabite, Ammonite, Edomite, Sidonians, the Hittite. He had that's a whole nother show. Then Solomon, the Bible lets us know, verse 5, he went after the Ashereth, the goddess of the Sidonians, Milcom, the detestable idol of the Ammonites. He did what was evil in the sight of the Lord, followed what just after any god that the ladies worship. But he married them. And what happened is they turned his heart, verse 2, away after their gods. See, this is why God forbid the Israelite men to marry the foreign women. It's not about their nationality or their ethnicity. It's not about where they reside. It's the gods they worship. And that is why we are called to make certain that when we engage in relationship, when we enter into covenant, that the covenant we enter into is a covenant that's going to bring glory and honor to God. Because when you enter into covenant relationship with someone, whether it be business, financial, whatever it is, and if they are not operating by the same principles that you operate by, it brings in adversity and it brings in stumbling blocks and challenges. And so this is one of the principles we see here in the book of Ruth. And so what happens is that they marry these women, and these are women who have been worshiping a God who embraces even human sacrifice. If you look further, and this is after the book of Ruth, this is in Kings, 2 Kings, as a matter of fact. It was the king of Moab who is going to sacrifice his son in order to try to gain a military victory. What does he do? He sacrifices him. He says, I'm going to offer him on their altar. And this is a reprehensible act to God. And so when you are engaging or enter into a relationship with someone who does not worship the true and living God, you open yourself up for being persuaded to follow those practices. We saw it here with Solomon. He does it. Now we see the king. And all of this is reasons why we were like, hey, this is not a good thing. Anyway, they do it. And what's going to happen? The boys die. It's a lot of death going on. They had married already. They got their wives. And after they've married, now this is key here in the book. It's about 10 years, verse 4 tells us. They've been married for a while here. They got their wives. They die. And so now Naomi is empty. There's nobody there. Once again, going back to our culture, who's going to care for them and provide for Naomi, Orpah, and Ruth? And notice the order of the names. Mahlon always is first and Chilion. And then when you see the lady's name, Ruth is second, Orpah is first. And we see that these women are here and they don't have a spouse, and it is bad for them because and look what the text says, she's bereaved of her 2 children and her husband, verse 5. Everybody's gone. She's got to figure out, how am I going to make it without the covering that comes from men who can provide a measure of protection and secure food for me? Her covering is gone. It's gone. This is so key in the book of Ruth. And now what's going to happen is we're going to see what's going to happen. Verse 6. Look what happens in verse 6. I always find this so intriguing. How the Lord shows himself faithful and he provides in our moment of need. This is just the beauty of God. So the boys are dead. They've been there 10 years. Okay. That's a long time. And Ruth says, hey, you go back. Return to your gods, ladies. She says, the Lord has visited Bethlehem. God's presence has come forth in verse 6. He had visited his people and giving them food. I like this visitation of God. The visitation means that he has provided, he's blessed them, he has given something that was lacking. And the Lord has a way of entering in, especially in the most dark and desperate situation. But look how long it was now. It was 10 years. It was 10 years. Now, here's my question. The text doesn't answer this. Had the visitation occurred before the 10-year period? We don't know. But we know that Naomi knew. How she knew, I'm certain there were probably caravans going back and forth between Moab and Bethlehem. But the text does not give us that insight. I believe that she knew before the death of those boys. I believe that Naomi, along with her daughter-in-laws and the boys, they had become comfortable in the foreign land of Moab. And the only thing that would get her back to Bethlehem would be death. I'm convinced that God sometimes brings hardships into our sphere to move us to the place where he wants to use us. And sometimes it comes through death, it comes through a firing, it comes through abandonment, it comes through a rift in a relationship. There are many traumatic things that may happen that God will use that he might be glorified, and he caused this shift and thrust, and this, I'm convinced, is what thrust them back to Bethlehem. It's incredible. It's incredible. Because I believe that Naomi had heard about the visitation of God before the death of her sons. Yeah. But that's what it took. The Bible tells us in verse 7, look, so she departed from the place where she was and her two daughter-in-laws with her, and they went on their way to return. Shuv, the Hebrew here for return, is going to be very important. It's infinitive construct is used to the land of Judah. It's this idea of turning back, going to what she had left. And I believe that also theologically we can read into some of this return. I believe part of the return is also Naomi returning to devotion to the Lord as well. Because in Moab, this is where we have Shemosh, pagan worship, some idolatrous practices. It was in the land. But now when she returned, she is leaving the influence of that demonic presence over the Moabite people and culture. And now she goes back to Bethlehem, where there should be the covenantal protection of God over his people. And so the whole idea of returning always have this theological, this biblical symbolism. It has this richness of being positioned back in the sphere of God's presence, power, protection, and provision. So she's going to return. She's going to go say, hey, you also, ladies, return, each of you, to your mother's home. Okay? So Naomi's saying, I'm going to return and go back to Bethlehem, but she tell her daughter-in-laws, you guys return and go to Moab, to your parents' home. But what does that entail? It's more than just, oh, y'all just go back. Them going back involves more than just I'm going back and live. No, this is a return to the complete devotion to the gods and the whole practice of worship there. And so that's what's happening here, saying return. And so she says, return and go back, verse 8, to your parents. And then she puts a little blessing. May the Lord deal kindly with you and have, as you've dealt kindly with the dead and with me. She said, hey, you were kind to my sons, and now may the Lord be kind to you as well.
Thank you, Dr. Coleman, for such an informative lesson about the culture at the time, as well as the powerful application you provide for our lives. Friend, if you're in a place where you want a second chance in life, or are facing a particularly difficult time, know that you can put your trust in God. Along these lines, Dr. Coleman's written a book which you'll find helpful. It's titled, Jonah, God's Second Chance Through Resurrection. In it, we see God's heart of compassion, grace, and mercy to a pagan people. You can log on to RochetColemanMinistries.org to order your copy today. Now, as we close, let's remember God is calling us to a complete and total release of idols in our lives and attachment to the temporal things in this world. Let's make choices for His glory.